She'll never know. It's already done. Those chilling words still echo in my mind, sending ice through my veins every time I remember them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, when I thought I was living the perfect love story instead of walking straight into a nightmare. My name is Amelia Collins. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed I was engaged to the most wonderful man in Kansas City, Missouri. Benjamin Torres seemed like everything I'd ever dreamed of. Charming, successful, and completely devoted to me. He worked as a financial advisor for Trivanta Corporation, always impeccably dressed and carrying himself with the kind of confidence that made heads turn. When he proposed 6 months ago on a hiking trail overlooking the city, I thought my life was finally falling into place. But that evening, 3 weeks ago, changed everything. We'd just finished dinner at our favorite restaurant downtown, and I was exhausted from planning our upcoming honeymoon to Costa Rica. Benjamin had suggested we go somewhere adventurous, somewhere we could hike and explore remote areas together. I loved that he shared my passion for outdoor adventures. Or so I thought. When we got home to my apartment, I excused myself for a shower, leaving my phone on the kitchen table. I'd been having problems with it lately, and the voice recording app had been turning on randomly. I figured I'd deal with it later, but I never imagined that malfunction would save my life. I was in the shower when I heard Benjamin's voice through the thin bathroom door, talking on what I assumed was a business call. His tone sounded different, though, hushed and urgent in a way I'd never heard before. Something about it made my stomach clench with unease, but I dismissed the feeling. Benjamin was always taking important calls about his clients' investments. When I came out 20 minutes later, Benjamin was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone, looking perfectly normal. He smiled at me with those warm brown eyes that had first captured my heart, and I almost forgot about the strange tone I'd heard earlier. "Everything okay with work?" I asked, settling beside him. "Just the usual client drama," he said, pulling me close. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart." But later that night, after Benjamin had gone home to his own place, I noticed my phone's recording app was still running. Curious, I played back the audio, expecting to hear nothing but household sounds and maybe fragments of our conversation. Instead, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Benjamin's voice came through clearly. "She'll never know. It's already done. The policy went through yesterday, and everything's set for the trip." My hand started shaking as I realized he'd been talking to someone while I was in the shower, completely unaware that my phone was capturing every word. I spent the entire night replaying that recording, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. What policy? What trip? The way Benjamin had spoken, secretive and calculating, was nothing like the loving fiancé I thought I knew. I'd met Benjamin 18 months ago at a coffee shop near my office where I work as a marketing coordinator for Zentren Global. He'd approached me with such genuine warmth, asking about the book I was reading, and somehow managing to make me laugh despite my usual shyness around strangers. Our relationship had developed beautifully, or so I believed. Benjamin was attentive and romantic, always planning thoughtful dates and remembering small details about my preferences. He'd seemed genuinely interested in my love for hiking and rock climbing, something I'd been passionate about since college. In fact, he'd encouraged me to take up even more adventurous activities, suggesting we try mountain climbing and exploring remote wilderness areas together. Looking back now, I realize how carefully he'd cultivated my trust. He'd met my parents, charmed my friends, and integrated himself into my life so seamlessly that everyone adored him. My mother constantly gushed about how lucky I was to find such a devoted partner. My best friend Jennifer had even said she envied how protective and caring Benjamin seemed. But as I sat there in my dark living room, replaying those chilling words over and over, pieces began forming a horrifying picture. 3 months ago, Benjamin had suggested we increase our life insurance coverage before the wedding. He'd explained it was standard practice for engaged couples, especially since we both led active lifestyles with some inherent risks. The conversation had seemed so practical and mature at the time. I remembered how he'd insisted on handling all the paperwork himself, saying he understood insurance policies better than I did because of his financial background. I'd signed whatever documents he'd brought me, trusting him completely. After all, why wouldn't I trust the man I was planning to marry? Now, those innocent-seeming conversations took on a sinister meaning. The way he'd pushed for higher coverage amounts, his insistence on naming each other as primary beneficiaries, his suggestion that we should both have policies worth at least $500,000. It all seemed calculated rather than caring. I thought about our planned honeymoon to Costa Rica, specifically to Manuel Antonio, an area known for its challenging hiking trails and remote locations. Benjamin had been adamant about choosing somewhere off the beaten path, somewhere we could have real adventures away from tourist crowds. He'd researched the most isolated trails, the ones with steep cliffs and dangerous terrain. My stomach churned as I realized I might be planning my own murder disguised as a romantic getaway. The recording continued with fragments I hadn't noticed the first time. The location is perfect. No witnesses for miles. Make it look completely natural. Benjamin's voice grew fainter, but the implications were clear enough to make me physically sick. I needed help, and I needed it fast. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent hours researching private investigators in Kansas City. I knew I couldn't go to the police with just a fragmentary recording and my suspicions. I needed concrete evidence. After reading dozens of reviews and testimonials, I settled on Detective Patricia Hughes, a former police officer who specialized in insurance fraud and domestic cases. Detective Hughes agreed to meet me that afternoon at a small cafe across town from my office. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp gray eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. I played the recording for her, watching her expression grow increasingly serious as she listened. "This is definitely suspicious," she said when the audio ended. "But we'll need much more than this to build a case. Tell me everything you know about Benjamin's background, his finances, his previous relationships." As I talked, I realized how little I actually knew about Benjamin's past. He'd told me he'd been engaged once before, to a woman named Catherine Walsh who had died in a hiking accident 2 years ago. At the time, I'd felt terrible for his loss, and admired how he'd managed to open his heart to love again despite such tragedy. Now, that story took on a much darker significance. "I need you to give me access to any documents you've signed," Detective Hughes said. "Insurance policies, beneficiary forms, anything related to your finances or assets. I also want to run a full background check on Benjamin Torres, including his previous relationships and any insurance claims he might have filed." "How long will this take?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Give me a week for the initial investigation. In the meantime, act completely normal. Don't let him know you suspect anything. Can you do that?" I nodded, though the thought of pretending everything was fine while living with a potential murderer made me feel sick. Detective Hughes handed me a small recording device, no bigger than a thumb drive. "Keep this with you at all times. If he says anything else suspicious, we need it documented. And Amelia," she looked me directly in the eyes, "be very careful. If your suspicions are correct, you're in immediate danger. Don't go anywhere isolated with him. Don't eat or drink anything he's prepared, and make sure people always know where you are." That evening, Benjamin came over for dinner as usual, bringing takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. As I watched him serve the food, Detective Hughes's warnings echoed in my mind. Every movement he made seemed calculated, every smile forced. When he suggested we try a new hiking trail that weekend, a remote area he'd discovered that was perfect for practicing for Costa Rica, I felt my blood run cold. "Actually, I'm feeling a bit tired lately," I said, forcing myself to sound casual. "Maybe we should stick to easier trails for now." Benjamin's expression flickered for just a moment, annoyance, maybe even anger, before his charming smile returned. "Of course, sweetheart, whatever makes you comfortable." But I caught something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, and it terrified me. Detective Hughes called me exactly 1 week later, her voice grim. "We need to meet immediately. What I've found is worse than we thought." I met her at the same cafe. my hands trembling as I sat down. She slid a thick folder across the table, and I could see from her expression that the news wasn't good. "Benjamin Torres isn't just planning to kill you for insurance money," she said quietly. "He's done this before. Catherine Walsh, his previous fiancé, didn't die in a hiking accident. She was murdered." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" I pulled the police reports from her death. Catherine was found at the bottom of a cliff in Colorado during what was supposed to be a romantic weekend getaway. Benjamin claimed she slipped while they were hiking alone. There were no witnesses, no signs of struggle, and the investigation was closed as an accidental death. Detective Hughes opened the folder. But here's what's interesting. Catherine had a $500,000 life insurance policy with Benjamin as the primary beneficiary. Sound familiar? I stared at the photographs of a beautiful young woman with dark hair and a bright smile. Catherine looked happy in every picture, completely unaware that her loving boyfriend was planning her murder. "There's more," Detective Hughes continued. "I've been monitoring Benjamin's activities this past week. He's been meeting with someone who deals in untraceable substances, specifically drugs that can simulate heart failure. He's also been researching remote hiking locations in Costa Rica, paying particular attention to areas with dangerous cliffs and no cell phone coverage." She pulled out printouts of Benjamin's internet search history. My stomach lurched as I read the searches. Natural-looking heart attack drugs, undetectable poisons, remote hiking trails Costa Rica, staging accidental deaths, life insurance payout timeframes. "How did you get this?" I whispered. "Benjamin's not as smart as he thinks he is. He's been using the public computer at the library downtown for his research, probably thinking it would be untraceable. But he didn't count on security cameras recording his screen sessions." Detective Hughes pointed to timestamps on the documents. "These searches were all conducted in the past month, right after you two finalized your honeymoon plans." The evidence was overwhelming, but the worst revelation was yet to come. Detective Hughes pulled out another document, my life insurance policy. "Amelia, this policy isn't for $500,000 like Benjamin told you. It's for $750,000. And there's a double indemnity clause for accidental death, which means he'd receive $1.5 million if you died in an accident while on vacation." I felt like I was going to be sick. "He forged my signature?" "No, you signed it. But look at this page." She showed me a section I'd never seen before. "This is the page he had you sign separately, remember? He told you it was just an additional beneficiary form. Instead, it was an amendment increasing your coverage and adding the accidental death clause." I remembered that day clearly now. Benjamin had brought the insurance paperwork to my apartment, spreading multiple forms across my kitchen table. He'd pointed to several signature lines, explaining each one quickly and casually. I'd trusted him completely, signing wherever he indicated without reading the fine print. "There's something else," Detective Hughes said, her voice even more serious. "I ran a more extensive background check on Benjamin. Catherine Walsh wasn't his first victim. 8 years ago, when he lived in Denver, he was briefly engaged to a woman named Patricia Hoffman. She died in an accidental drowning during a weekend camping trip. No life insurance payout that time because they weren't married yet, but it established his pattern. The room began to spin. He's a serial killer. He's a serial killer who's gotten very good at his method. The beauty of his scheme is that he genuinely courts these women, makes them fall in love with him, then kills them in ways that look completely accidental. No one suspects the grieving fiancé." I thought about all the times Benjamin had been so loving, so attentive, so perfect. It had all been an elaborate performance, a carefully constructed lie, designed to get me to sign my own death warrant. "What do we do now?" I asked. Detective Hughes leaned forward. "Now we set a trap." The plan Detective Hughes outlined was both brilliant and terrifying. We would let Benjamin proceed with his scheme while gathering irrefutable evidence of his intent to commit murder. I would wear a wire during our conversations, continue acting normally, and document every step of his plan. The key is to get him to explicitly state his intentions, Detective Hughes explained. We need him to confess on tape, either to you or during one of his phone calls. Right now, we have circumstantial evidence and strong suspicions, but a good lawyer could create reasonable doubt. We need a confession. That evening, I sat in my apartment, wearing the tiny recording device Detective Hughes had given me, waiting for Benjamin to arrive for dinner. When he knocked on my door, I took a deep breath and forced myself to smile as I let him in. "How was your day, sweetheart?" he asked, kissing my cheek. The gesture that once filled me with warmth now made my skin crawl. "Good, though I've been thinking about our honeymoon," I said, following the script Detective Hughes and I had practiced. "I'm getting nervous about some of those hiking trails you picked out. Maybe we should choose easier ones." Benjamin's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Amelia, we've talked about this. You need to push yourself out of your comfort zone. These trails will be amazing, and I'll be right there with you. But what if something happens? What if one of us gets hurt in such a remote area?" "Nothing's going to happen," Benjamin said firmly. "I've researched every detail. I know exactly what I'm doing." The way he said it, with such cold certainty, sent chills down my spine. Over the next hour, I carefully steered our conversation toward the insurance policies, expressing concerns about the coverage amounts and asking him to explain the terms again. "You don't need to worry about any of that," Benjamin said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "I've handled everything. The policies are perfect, and if anything ever happened to either of us, the other would be well taken care of." "But $750,000 seems like so much," I pressed. "Are you sure we need that much coverage?" Benjamin went very still. "What did you say?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I'd made a mistake. I wasn't supposed to know the real amount. I thought you said 750,000? "No, Amelia. I told you 500,000. Where did you get that number?" "Think fast," I told myself. I must have misremembered. The insurance agent mentioned different amounts when he called last week, and I got confused. Benjamin relaxed slightly, but I could see him studying my face carefully. "What insurance agent? No one should be calling you directly." "It was just a routine follow-up call," I said, trying to sound casual. "Nothing important." But I could tell Benjamin didn't believe me. For the rest of the evening, he was quieter than usual, watching me with those calculating eyes. When he left that night, he kissed me goodbye. But there was something different about it. Something final, like he was already mourning my death. After he left, I called Detective Hughes immediately. "He's getting suspicious," I told her. "I think I made a mistake." "Don't panic," she said. "We expected this might happen. It actually works in our favor. Suspicious people make more mistakes. He'll be more likely to slip up now. What if he tries to kill me before Costa Rica? That's why I'm having you watch 24/7 starting now. You won't be alone for a moment." Detective Hughes paused. "Amelia, I know this is terrifying, but we're very close to having enough evidence to arrest him. Just hold on a little longer." But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that Benjamin was already planning to accelerate his timeline. I was right to be worried. The next morning, Benjamin called me at work with an unexpected proposal. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," he said, his voice unnaturally cheerful. "You're right that those Costa Rica trails might be too challenging. What if we take a practice hike this weekend instead? I found this amazing trail about 2 hours outside the city, very secluded, perfect for testing our gear and building your confidence." My blood went cold. This was it. He was moving up his timeline. "This weekend? But we haven't planned anything." "Sometimes the best adventures are spontaneous," Benjamin said. "I've already checked the weather. It's going to be perfect. We can leave early Saturday morning, make a whole day of it. Just you and me in nature, like we always dreamed." I forced enthusiasm into my voice. "That sounds wonderful. Where exactly is this trail? It's called Eagle's Ridge. Very remote. Hardly anyone goes there. I found it through a hiking forum. The views are supposed to be incredible. He paused. Amelia, I think this trip could be really special for us. A chance to reconnect before the wedding stress gets too overwhelming. After I hung up, I immediately called Detective Hughes. He's planning to kill me this weekend. I know. We've been monitoring his communications. He called a burner phone number 3 times this morning, the same number he's been using to contact his drug supplier. We also tracked his internet activity. He spent 2 hours last night researching Eagle's Ridge Trail, specifically looking at topographical maps showing cliff faces and water features. So what do? We let him take you there, but you won't be alone. My team will be tracking your location, and we'll have agents positioned throughout the area. We'll also have a helicopter on standby. The moment he makes his move, we'll intervene. What if something goes wrong? What if he kills me before you can stop him? Detective Hughes's voice was steady and reassuring. Amelia, I've been doing this for 20 years. We won't let that happen. But we need him to actually attempt the crime before we can arrest him for attempted murder. Right now, all we have is conspiracy and insurance fraud. We need to catch him in the act. That evening, Benjamin came over to help me prepare for our hiking trip. He was more animated than I'd seen him in weeks, talking excitedly about the trail and what we should pack. Watching him plan my murder with such enthusiasm was surreal and horrifying. Make sure you bring plenty of water, he said, checking my backpack. And these energy bars I picked up, they're supposed to be amazing for stamina on long hikes. I noticed he kept the energy bars in a separate bag, claiming he wanted to surprise me with them during our hike. Detective Hughes had warned me that he would likely try to drug my food to make me disoriented before pushing me off a cliff. I can't wait, I said, forcing a smile. It'll be nice to get away from everything. Yes, Benjamin agreed, and something in his tone made me look up. His eyes had that cold, calculating look again. It'll be perfect. Just the 2 of us, completely alone. That night, I barely slept. Tomorrow, I would come face to face with my would-be killer in an isolated area where he planned to end my life. The only thing standing between me and death was Detective Hughes's team and the wire I'd be wearing. As I lay awake, I wondered how many women before me had spent their last night alive trusting Benjamin completely, never knowing that the man they loved was planning their murder. Catherine Walsh, Patricia Hoffman, and who knew how many others. All of them gone because they'd fallen in love with a monster. But I had something they didn't have. I knew the truth. And tomorrow, Benjamin Torres was going to pay for every life he'd taken. Saturday morning arrived gray and misty. Perfect weather for a murder. Benjamin picked me up at 7 a.m, his SUV loaded with hiking gear and a cooler full of food and drinks. He seemed relaxed and happy, humming along to the radio as we drove toward Eagle's Ridge. You seem excited, I said, testing the recording device hidden in my jacket pocket. I love these kinds of adventures with you, Benjamin replied. Today's going to be really special, Amelia. A day we'll never forget. The sinister meaning behind his words wasn't lost on me. As we drove deeper into the mountains, cell phone coverage disappeared, and the roads became increasingly remote. This was exactly what Benjamin had planned, an isolated location where my screams wouldn't be heard, and my body might not be found for days. When we reached the trailhead, Benjamin was unusually solicitous, insisting on carrying my backpack and checking my hiking boots multiple times. We need to make sure you're completely safe out there, he said with apparent concern. I'd never forgive myself if anything happened to you. The trail was even more isolated than I'd imagined. We hiked for 2 hours without seeing another soul, climbing steadily through dense forest toward what Benjamin claimed were breathtaking cliffside views. Every step took us further from civilization and closer to the spot where he planned to kill me. Let's take a break, Benjamin suggested when we reached a clearing. You must be getting tired. He pulled out the energy bars he'd been so excited about, offering me one with an encouraging smile. These will give you energy for the tough part of the trail ahead. This was it. The moment Detective Hughes had warned me about. Benjamin was trying to drug me before we reached the cliff. I pretended to take a bite while actually palming the bar, then excused myself to step behind some trees. I need to use the restroom, I said. I'll be right back. As I walked away, I activated the emergency signal Detective Hughes had given me. Within minutes, I heard the distant sound of helicopter rotors approaching. Benjamin heard it too. When I returned to the clearing, his expression had changed completely. The mask of loving concern had slipped, revealing the cold killer underneath. "What's that helicopter doing here?" Benjamin demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. "I don't know," I said, trying to sound innocent. "Maybe it's a medical emergency somewhere." But Benjamin was no longer buying my act. His eyes narrowed as he studied my face, and I could see the moment he realized I knew the truth about him. "You lying bitch," he snarled, dropping all pretense. "You know, don't you? You know everything." There was no point in pretending anymore. "I know you killed Catherine Walsh. I know you killed Patricia Hoffman. And I know you brought me here to kill me for the life insurance money." Benjamin's face twisted with rage and something else. Fear, as he realized his carefully constructed plan was falling apart. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to record everything," I said, pulling out the small recording device. "Every conversation, every plan, every sick detail of how you've been murdering women for years." The helicopter sound was getting closer, and I could hear vehicles approaching on the access road below. Benjamin spun around wildly, understanding that he was trapped. "You have no idea what you've done," he said, his voice turning desperate. "No one will believe you. I'm a respected financial advisor. You're just a crazy woman making accusations." "Actually, the police already believe me," I said. "They've been building a case against you for weeks. The drug purchases, the internet searches, the insurance fraud. It's all documented." Benjamin's face went white as armed law enforcement officers emerged from the tree line, guns drawn. Detective Hughes appeared behind them, speaking into her radio. "Benjamin Torres, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and the murders of Catherine Walsh and Patricia Hoffman," she announced. As they handcuffed him, Benjamin looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Amelia." "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's finally over." Benjamin Torres faced first-degree murder charges for his systematic plan to kill me for insurance money, while investigators reopened the cases of Catherine Walsh and Patricia Hoffman, leading to additional murder charges and a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The evidence Detective Hughes and I had gathered, recordings, financial documents, and internet search history, created an airtight case that destroyed Benjamin's claims of innocence and exposed him as a calculating serial killer who had used romance to target vulnerable women. His reputation as a respected financial advisor crumbled when his criminal activities became public knowledge, while his family and colleagues discovered they had been unknowingly associated with a man who murdered women for profit. The insurance companies not only voided all policies, but pursued civil fraud charges, ensuring that Benjamin would face financial ruin alongside his criminal conviction. I testified at Benjamin's trial with a strength I never knew I possessed, helping secure justice not only for myself, but for Catherine, Patricia, and any other potential victims he might have targeted in the future. Looking back on that terrifying journey from naive fiancé to the woman who brought down a killer, I realized that my accidental phone recording had been more than just a lucky break. It had been the evidence needed to stop a monster who believed love was just another weapon in his arsenal, and I had turned that weapon against him in the most satisfying way possible.